Me, your girl, Empress Goddess, the Georgia Peach, your host with the most. Hope you're doing well this evening. As always, keeping an attitude of gratitude, being thankful. We're going to get in there with thoughts or things.
Thoughts are things. Prentice Mulford. Each thought is a brick with which we build our destiny, for better or for worse. Thoughts shape our face and give it its personal expression. Our thoughts determine the behavior, presence, and shape of our whole body. The laws of perfect beauty and perfect health are identical. Both depend entirely on the state of mind or, in other words, on the coherence of the main thoughts, which we transmit to others, and which others transmit to us. Today, the enormous power of thoughts is not only wasted, but worse, due to ignorance and habits ingrained over the years, we discharge our batteries in the wrong direction. We endlessly accumulate greed, envy, mockery, and other vileness, and then discharge them, passing all the real substance of thoughts through lousy transformers, on other people, perhaps harming them, but always harming ourselves. Other people's thoughts can penetrate into our being, just as noxious gases can penetrate into our houses. Repeat these words unceasingly: I do not want to let myself be enslaved by anyone, and you will find the way to free yourself. And you will find the way to free yourself from slavery, dependence, and begging. Depending on the fabric of which our reveries are made, we will endow our destiny with gold, or with explosives. The deeper the reveries, the more perfect the introspection and abstraction, the better our mental force will be able to act, within a radius of action of thousands of kilometers. Everything we call occult forces, for example telepathy, is generated in this way. Any form of thought can materialize instantaneously, if it is done with sufficient intensity. All people potentially have these forces at their disposal. Every day we stylize a phase of our being, we put ourselves into another imaginary character. The main role we play most often will give our body, the mask of that role, its dominant aspect. He who spends most of his life complaining out of habit, holding orgies of ill humor and lamentation, intoxicates his blood, ruins the features and complexion of his face. For in the invisible laboratory of your spirit, an evil agent is being elaborated. The thought, once passed into action, that is to say, once thought, will generate an inevitable law, which will attract to it the same thoughts that surround it. To surrender to an irritated and impotent state of mind means to open the doors to the thoughts of all the irritated and impotent ones of the city, that is to say, to load your great magnet, the spirit, with harmful and destructive currents, and to connect your mental battery to all the currents of the same kind. Whoever thinks of stealing and murdering enters into spiritual contact with all the thieves and murderers of the whole world. We all end up as we are accustomed to see ourselves, and we must not allow others to mold us according to their thoughts, that is, in the way that is most comfortable for them. Hence the ideal of the good child, or the exemplary wife. What is truly feminine will only be known when women have begun to be themselves. When this happens, the world will suddenly be psychically twice as rich as at present, in which man, pursuing exclusively his own ideal of masculinity, has decreed a forged ideal of masculinity, has decreed a forced ideal of femininity. People who are always cautious, who foresee and weigh everything, always fall into the trap, because always counting on difficulties means creating them. A habit so ingrained that it seems impossible to exterminate. Everything you think attracts the same from the invisible. Meditate inwardly on any kind of crime, and you will attract to you criminal realities from the hidden side of life. Those hidden and invisible forces are what create the material conditions for crime, paving the way for it to this side of existence. If in your favorite newspaper every morning you avidly read the news about murders, robberies, scandals, and tragedies occurring on land, sea, and air, you are attracting something invisible of the same kind. You become attuned to spiritual events of a lower order, which pass through you, and act upon you in such a way that you will be more exposed to them, even physically, i.e., you increase the chances of being touched by something coming from this region of shocks, especially if for years you do it while eating breakfast, i.e., during a state of absorbed passivity. Perhaps it is not so old-fashioned, as the clever white barbarian thinks, that the esoteric, childish people of the East prefer to greet the morning with a hymn to the sun, or with the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, rather than by reading the diary of the filth. Everything is reality flowing in the invisible, and he who in the spirit immerses himself in these currents of the lowest, most frightful, and meanest, and even if only as an interested listener, who merely listens with a bit of exciting morbidness, and mistakenly believes to be far from the battlefield, ends up being swept away by them. But the circuit has already been closed, letting the current that carries evil and crime pass through. Whoever enjoys reading news about robberies, burglaries, and thefts runs a greater risk of attracting more of the same to himself and to his home. This person and the thief end up attracted to each other because they both swim in the same river of thoughts, unaware of the power that unites them. But no power is as irresistible as the one whose existence we are not aware of because we are not in a position to resist it. He who for 10 seconds imagines something abominable and terrible, something that would make another person despair in body and soul, has already set in motion a force, which in part will fall upon himself. He who for 10 seconds imagines something pleasant and loving, something that would bring joy to another person, without sting or shadow, has set in motion a force, which will also partly fall upon him. The longer the senses are oriented towards an object, for better or for worse, the more its invisible reality is reinforced. In the end it will be forced, always fed by a new substance of thoughts, to mature as an agent of joy, or as an agent of sorrow in the visible world, which is nothing other than the densest level of the invisible world. To orient the spirit towards a goal, willingly and without hesitation, to create a desirable and joyful atmosphere for an indefinite time, is something that is not very fashionable at the moment. What are the people around us thinking about? Well, about
What it do, Charles? What's up, gamer bro?
being paid, about the quality of the beer, maybe about going on an excursion. Women, always on the lookout, with the new fashion magazine, the dressmaker, the bridge game, or the trip they're going to take in the summer. Always ahead with a faute de mieux, lurking with a diffuse undertone of eroticism, never strong enough to face life, just entertaining it, with countless mornings and afternoons, whose throats could and should be wrung, slowly, one after the other. The state of mind in which we find ourselves is often a force capable of orchestrating events in our favor, or against us. For example, there are beings who are born with soul, but without impetus, without goal or path, who are not capable of taking care of themselves, nor of preserving what they have inherited. They are academic examples of a way of thinking that generates failures. Others, however, born in poverty, are able to accumulate well-being from the beginning. They direct all their thinking will toward one goal and succeed, if making money in itself can be considered a success. The promotion of any enterprise begins with fantasy. Those who, starting from a humble position, become proprietors of 12 railway companies, are always spiritually ahead of their location, that is, as soon as they reach one position, they are already longing for the next. Whoever endures for years as a ragpicker has evidently never seen himself in another situation, i.e., he has never psychically surpassed the ragpicker's frontier. He may envy others who are in a better position than himself, wishing to have many of the things they possess, but he has never said to his own soul, I want to free myself from this trade, and I will succeed, I will rise to something purer and higher than rag picking. But mere envy does not help to advance, and that man will remain a rag picker all his life. He who is content to look upon the finer things of this world as unattainable, who sits on the first rung of the ladder, complaining of all those above him, will probably always remain at this level. Any spiritual posture, in which we remain inert for a certain period of time, directs us towards things in life that encourage this posture. Whoever has decided to have a business or an enterprise, or to develop an invention, molds something out of invisible elements, which are nevertheless as real as any iron or wooden machine. In turn, that enterprise or that plan will attract more forces favorable to its realization, forces that will materialize in the visible world. But he who fears misfortune, who lives in fear of meeting at any moment with something bad or with an accident, is building a world of thoughts, attracting a silent force, which according to the law of attraction gathers around it harmful and destructive elements. Both success and failure have their origin in the same law, which can benefit both the one who tries to save someone who is drowning and the one who stabs the same person. Every time we think, we manufacture something, from invisible ingredients, that contains forces that can benefit or harm us, depending on the thoughts we have previously transmitted. The cornerstone of every successful endeavor, in this, and in any other existence is, never to think that something is impossible. Never refute a priori any idea, no matter how crazy or far-fetched it may seem. Wait first until your instincts have gathered, because they are not always there when you need them. Only then, perhaps, will that fine dew of dawn appear, of which only those who are sitting in the waiting room for what is to come will participate. But this greatest and purest miracle, even if it were visible to the whole world, would not last more than the blink of an eye, for it would pass immediately and without hindrance into the brain of mankind. The more far-fetched and fantastic a thought is, the more time must be allowed for it to act. To shout, impossible, just because something seems impossible to us, means to engender that bad habit of despising things on principle. Consciousness behaves like a prison full of doors, which do not let the infinite in, and both inside and outside this prison, only an insignificant and solitary human being remains. The power of the state of mind. Whatever happens to us, the cause is always a state of mind, rehearsed for a long time. Whoever silently and unhesitatingly harbors in his heart a lively desire to succeed, unhesitatingly drinks from the invisible river as many auxiliary forces for his spiritual scheme, as the embryo drinks from the mother's blood, according to the established plan, and unconsciously, unerringly absorbing all the elements he will need, for each of the stages of his development. For the blessed one, the whole cosmos is like a placenta that nourishes his actions. By auxiliary forces, we mean above all, the ever-increasing spiritual fecundity, the discovery of new ways and means. That is why we use the form se, things do by themselves. Language has known this for a long time and, grammatically, we all use this great creative word se to perfection, but unfortunately we do not manage to put it into practice. But in the end, however, auxiliary forces means that we will always find the right people to carry out our plans. Never waste your energy searching for these auxiliary forces and their helpers with your bodily senses. Let your unconscious take care of that. You only have to make the right environment available to you. For example, a pregnant woman lets the embryo grow in the most natural way possible, and according to her own inherited secret laws, which in the end will make it possible for the new being to see the light. The mother has nothing else to do but to have good hope. The spirit behaves in the same way during the gestation of a plan. It thinks incessantly, I am determined, go ahead, it does nothing but think, not only with the brain and the heart, but with every movement, every cell. This will eventually generate a force that will transport any idea into reality, as surely as a crane lifts its load. The forces that are born with the spirit in the invisible continue to act even when the body is unconscious. To his beloved will God give in sleep, awaken and glimpse all open paths, and a host of new plans and methods converge toward the beloved goal. It is precisely these new plans that will set the body in motion, for then it will not be possible to stand still, and it will be seen beforehand how everything will be fulfilled. Now the time has come to act with due speed and certainty. But it can also happen that before reaching this maturity to act, one is already so exhausted from searching for opportune occasions that one lacks the necessary freshness to assimilate the liberating idea when it really appears. All business success is based on the continuous flow of new plans, thoughts, combinations, and occurrences. All those thoughts and talk about misery, calamities, and crimes undermine the ability to attract good things. It is a method of stealing money from one's wallet and health from one's body. When one surrounds oneself with great and healthy things, well-being can grow almost limitlessly, and even if not in reality, at least in fantasy, towards a world full of animals, forests, and young and free seas. Whoever is not lucky enough to have dogs, deer, and birds as living friends, let him at least dream of them. Whoever feels oppressed and weak and cannot leave the city, let him throw himself with his spirit into storms and tides, or visit a circus, and enjoy in the flesh what beautiful horses, agile acrobats, and clowns are capable of. And notice how in this atmosphere of psychic diversity, the worries of the audience are unconsciously wiped from their faces. What we call here the driving force of the state of mind is not the longing of the audience to be in a state of mind, but the desire to be in a state of mind. Is not the longing for material objects, because longing is always accompanied by impatience and suffering, and impatience takes away what is desired or, at least, delays its arrival. When you think, right now and here I want it, I'm tired of this eternal waiting. Now or never, you are on the wrong track. You waste your strength in quarrels and arguments, because the desired thing has not come to you, and you do not concentrate your strength on the desire itself, where it has to act, but on the non-existence of the desired thing, thus reinforcing its non-existence. Never go too far in desire. Don't let a desire break your heart. It would be like someone, in anger, wrecking his car because it is stuck in the mud. It is better to use force to get the car out of the mud. However, he who has succeeded in avoiding the destruction of the cradle of his longing, must be careful not to make another mistake, however understandable it may seem, to see himself in the longed-for situation in a superficial way, as if he had already reached the desired goal, as if it were an image, and even an idealized image, of himself. Let us imagine someone, who wishes to own a very beautiful and special house, to live in it with a loved one. It will not help him to imagine his life in this house as if it were a movie. He must not see it from the outside, as if he were looking in a mirror. He has to be inside the desired I, otherwise he will only be his own spectator. Expressed in words, the authentic, inner strength of the spirit, would be something like, may my pure and joyful self also be complemented by all these things. I need to have such a house around me, such a loved one, and I will get it, provided there is a will, wiser than mine, that has decided that all this will be for my good. It has to be a state that comes from the heart, totally positive and at the same time sweet, sunny, and determined. Never accompanied by doubt, irritation, or impatience. To maintain this right state of mind, it is neither necessary nor advisable to always have the desired in mind. The only thing capable of attracting success, beauty, and joy is our habitual state of mind, and not the continual thinking of the thing we desire. If you are able to anchor this state of mind in your heart, and say to yourself calmly and inwardly, I will travel. I will see the most beautiful tropical countries, then you will be able to quietly forget that desire for a while, entertain yourself with other things, and prepare your desires in other fields, without delaying at all, the force that will lead you to make that trip. Whenever that desire to visit exotic countries comes back to you, you only have to integrate it again, in the spirit of your unbreakable will to achieve it. There is nothing that influences more, in the success or failure of any desire, than our predominant state of mind, more than work, intelligence, sharpness, or application. Each spirit is a sum of psychic substance, collected in the infinite abyss of time, built up from the experiences and memories of innumerable bodies. This psychic substance acts like a magnet. It has the ability to attract thoughts and to re-emit them and, like a magnet, to increase its strength through work. Just as any piece of iron can be magnetized by contact, any person, even the untalented, can attract spiritual forces to it, and thus become spiritually creative. The currents to which a person opens himself will determine the quality of his spiritual charge. If the person emanates decisiveness, hope, joy, strength, fortitude, justice, patience, order, and precision, he will eventually attract more of these elements of thought, present in the environment, from the elements that are already part of that person's field of success. A magnetic whirlwind is created, which will carry forces of the same sign faster and faster towards the center, because the elements themselves are now in space, and attract other like-minded elements, the bodies we will meet in the future, whose function is to foster, or destroy, us. It is these elements, with which our fluids have already mixed long before, when they were still far from the body. What is the meaning of life? No one can evaluate the meaning of his own life, which is determined by a higher universal destiny, a law that dominates and guides us. Where to? Towards an ever greater and unlimited capacity to be happy. Every day and every hour we advance towards happiness, with more and more sensitive, wiser, and clearer organs, however much the appearances may seem otherwise. The pains we suffer come from the very growth of the spirit, which every day presses us more strongly against the causes of our misery, so that we immediately perceive and accept this pain as proof that we are on the wrong path, and that we must get out of it, whatever the cost. To the one who takes it seriously, to the one who from the depths of his being seeks the right path, something will always appear to guide him, because one of the most subtle and profound laws postulates that no authentic supplication can remain unanswered. Every desire and every intense and authentic prayer must bear the desired fruits. People who seem to be persecuted by errors may be the kindest and the best, but they are people who speak to their own being with hardness. They do not realize where fate wants to take them. Like a horse that, trembling under the rod, is incapable of jumping over an obstacle. Where there is suffering, there is error. Where there is pain, there is always something wrong. Pain is the compass that guides us to the islands of the blessed. In the small circle of the wise, there are some who live so harmoniously with the infinite that the line of their respective destinies no longer recognizes the suffering of tortuous paths. But these few sages, knowingly, retain a small defect, a weak point of their psyche, to have an earthly compass, capable of measuring the smallest deviations from the truth, whose needle reacts to the slightest error, with the body. Each desire, thought or expressed, brings us closer to the desired with an intensity directly proportional to the intensity of the desire and the number of people who share it. These people direct the spiritual functions towards certain orbits, setting in motion each of the silent forces of the will, which will help to give form to the desired. The secret of magic lies in the human being's ability to use the most subtle and intense mental waves to his advantage. Happiness and health are intertwined with the fibers of being. We must see our own image, freed from all evil, week after week, month after month and year after year, until this dream becomes a fixed idea, a second nature, so that it can continue to act in the subconscious. Never expect sickness or pain for tomorrow, no matter how much sickness or pain you have today. For tomorrow expect only health and strength. In other words, health, beauty, and strength must become your dream of the day, because a dream expresses the right state of mind much more clearly than hope. The evil of unconscious tyranny. Faith is the seed of all miracles. But in this seed can germinate both evil and good. From the seed of evil can grow a tree, in the top of which every noisy bird of ill omen will nest. Our dark and gloomy fantasy has faith in misfortunes. When one of our organs causes us a slight discomfort, after 1 or 2 days, we already begin to expect that discomfort, and we begin to imagine that the organ is sick. Then we hear that the ailment has a pompous name, and that it sounds dangerous. All this intensifies the belief in misfortune. Then the influence of other brains appears, friends and relatives become worried and frightened, thus reminding us of our condition. With all this, we fall into a vicious circle, which weakens us even more. No one transmits to us his own image of strength and well-being. The imagination of being sick comes to us from everywhere. The spiritual forces of everything around us act in the wrong direction. When a friend says goodbye with a "get well," he does it with a compassionate worried tone, which seems to foreshadow the worst. Now we receive the substance of what we feared. Relatives who care for us do nothing but further our ruin. People with whom we only have professional or business ties are of little importance. But we must be careful with whom we share our most intimate moments, when we let ourselves go, when we are in a passive state. Whoever shares those moments with a person, be it a man or a woman, who is not at his or her level, will lose much spiritual strength in the things he or she undertakes, because that person, inferior, will deviate his or her line of action or, at the very least, will influence it. Therefore, much will depend on the person with whom we share our intimacy. These people have elements which for us can mean life or death, courage or cowardice, security or insecurity. A sum of unconscious tyranny emanates from the bonds of kinship. Often, adult children inwardly assign to their fathers and mothers places in life that the latter are not willing to occupy. The essence of this thought, never openly expressed, could be formulated as follows: our mother is too old to wear such light colors. It would be ridiculous for our widowed mother to remarry, or it is logical that our mother does not want to participate in our parties. Mom doesn't want to participate in our parties, it's better if she stays at home taking care of the children. Or, it's time for dad to retire from the business. When it comes to obtaining results, no mental force acts with such subtlety, none is so powerful, for better or worse, than that stream of homogenized thoughts which, emanating simultaneously from several persons, concentrates until it produces the desired effects in a given person, whether consciously or unconsciously. The force acts and produces a result. If the same opinions of 3 or 4 persons are directed toward the being who has given them new bodies, whom they call mother, the force of those opinions will be powerful enough to place the mother precisely in the most comfortable place for the children. So this whole process of conventional thinking could be expressed as follows: Mom is getting older, and it is natural for her to gradually withdraw from active life, and stay at home, so that there she can enjoy herself with the other retired relatives, and assert herself as a superior, in times of illness or during family events. Thanks to the effect of this unified feeling that surrounds them, many mothers lose their privileges as individuals, and behave exactly as their children unconsciously want them to behave. There are mothers who say, "I don't care what happens to me, as long as my children grow up healthy, then I will have accomplished my mission." However, a mother must keep in mind what will become of her. Because if her growth in wisdom and culture is limited, the growth of her children will be limited as well. A good mother will always do her best, so that her children admire her as much as they love her, but admiration and respect are reserved for those women who defend their place in life with fortitude, strength, and freedom, and who grow tirelessly towards ever new goals. No mother can expect too much love and respect from adult children who hide in a corner of the kitchen, who become a symbiosis between nurse and nanny, and who teach their family to be used as pack animals for all domestic calamities, real or imagined. Precisely for the above reasons, many mothers are belittled by their adult children or simply pushed aside. Mothers who demean themselves to such an extent, because, mistakenly, they believe they are doing their children a favor, often end up paying bitterly for that mistake. Whoever allows himself to be continually dictated to by others, who abandons his own inclinations and goals, who lives to satisfy the desires of others, gradually loses the right to make decisions for himself. He accumulates around him so many other people's thoughts that he ends up becoming a part of them, an instrument that silently obeys the mute will of those around him. Such a person becomes a fossil, a helpless servant who gradually loses the physical and spiritual capacity to undertake anything, a senile grandfather, a useless old man sitting in front of the stove, who is more tolerated than loved. In many cases, this is due to the thoughts that adult children have about their parents who are too sacrificed. It is the mute power of the spirits, which in a closed environment act on fathers and mothers, and end up sinking them. Much of the deterioration and weakness attributed to old age has its origin in the negative influence of a group of spirits, who continually try to overcome and dominate each other, consciously or unconsciously, it matters little. A man may lead his great enterprise with impetus and joy, but his sons interfere more and more in the enterprise. A silent youthful force is conspiring against the old, creating a force that can hardly be opposed by a single individual. It is an intense, continuous and permanent pressure in a certain direction. Its effects are even more effective when the father is not aware of the pressure exerted on him, when he is not aware of the existence of this kind of hidden force. The only thing he notices is that he begins to feel tired. The old energy gives way, and the man attributes it to the old age that besets him. Spending 10 minutes arguing with one's own destiny, or envying the happiness of others, generates in us a sum of forces, destined to undermine our own luck. Every thought of envy or hatred comes back to us like a boomerang. Unpleasant feelings towards people who swim in wealth are a waste of time, which not only bring us misfortune, but destroy and advance the happiness that could have fallen into our lap. Most of the sick prepare their sick bed spiritually, working hard and painfully for years to get it. He who waits for misfortune is crying out for it, and will undoubtedly get it. Bad habits accumulated during life must be nipped in the bud. Weakness generated by low self-esteem. A person with low self-esteem is not as appreciated by others as one who respects himself. Without self-esteem, no one will be willing to help you improve your position. There will be no bundle of thoughts to tuck you in. Many people who examine themselves come to the conclusion that there are positions in life they would never accept. 9 out of 10 women dishwashers would never think of seeing themselves as managers of the hotel chain of which they are now the most humble collaborators. However, sometimes a person in a similar precarious situation is able to rise to a much higher position, because she dared to think about it. That was the invisible driving force which led her to achieve it. If we persevere, destiny will always lead us to where we want to be spiritually. And even if we don't get directly to the goal, at least we will get closer to it, reaching a position which will be better than lying in the gutter, without goals or ambitions. Whoever thinks that something he offers to others has little value, externalizes a force that makes others think that, indeed, it is something despicable. If you want to sell diamonds on the street, and your appearance and behavior make others doubt the authenticity of your diamonds, 99% of potential buyers will think, due to the suggestion of your thoughts, that you are trying to sell them pieces of polished glass. And the one buyer who has recognized that the diamonds are genuine will try to deceive you, thus supporting his own doubts. Do not bend, never feel demeaned in the presence of anyone. Otherwise, you will pour into your state of mind a torrent of enslaving dependence, and you will open the floodgate, which will let the same torrent pass before any unworthy event. You must admire and honor the talent of others, but always from king to king, with the pure and deep desire that the same talent awakens and is born in you. Teach your children never to think that they are worthless. If they get used to having no self-esteem, others will also get used to seeing them as inferior beings, now as children and later as adults. There is nothing more harmful to the individual than to lower oneself, and many children begin their lives weakened by the burden of eternal criticism. Teach your children to dream, to believe and to hope that they will succeed. Because repeated hope in success creates the right motives, the right means, and the right path to achieve it. Because having to endure injustice is even more reprehensible than committing it. Today, we all still believe in many lies. Error does not manifest itself. So we continue to live according to our subconscious errors, and sufferings emanate from these subconscious errors. When we discover hidden errors in ourselves, instead of getting depressed, we should rejoice about it, just as the sailor rejoices when he finds the waterway that could have sunk his ship. Once recognized, our mistakes are subjugated to self-confession. If we succeed in this, and if we also manage to overcome our foolish pride, which is responsible for our unwillingness to seek escape, we will have taken a great step on the road to eternal happiness. Repeatedly ruminating our own mistakes is detrimental to the psyche and harmful to our health. The true nourishment of the spirit are the thoughts that are incessantly renewed, our ever-changing, ever-growing interpretations of everything that happens within us and around us. Learning to look at things with new eyes every day, to fly daily over the plans, the opinions, and the goals, which we had set for the day that is ending, that is the state of mind, by which the spirit becomes capable of receiving the daily bread, which renews our body. Our favorite spoiled fear. The whole of humanity never ceases to be afraid, of pain, of death, of losing money or love, and of anything. Moreover, each of us has our favorite fear, which we pamper to our heart's content. This extends to the most trivial things. The streets are full of people who, if they have nothing better to fear, at least fear missing the next bus or streetcar. The more sensitive the human being is, the more he suffers under those currents that surround him, until he learns, asking for strength in silence, to build around himself a wall of positive thoughts, on which the of others bounce. Every human being has his favorite fear, an illness he has never suffered from, but always hopes for, or anything else the loss of which would affect him in a special way. Any little thing enough for his favorite fear suffers. There are myriads of different symptoms. Weakness, lack of appetite, fatigue of the limbs, inability to concentrate on our professional tasks, mental fugue, etc. The ability to receive thoughts can easily become a source of weakness, or of strength. It is precisely the sensitive and highly developed spirits that tend to have a fragile body, because they unconsciously absorb many harmful waves, without having any idea of their existence. Personal relationships with inadequate people is one of the main sources of these evils. The female organism, more delicate, is even more exposed to the shadows and mental rays that surround it. The man, absorbed in his affairs, sometimes manages to seize a certain positive energy, which allows him to repel the currents of fear. Women, on the other hand, suffer 1,000 times more within the walls of the home than their husbands imagine, and they never cease to wonder how their wives suffer from these eternal illnesses, fixed ideas, and nervousness. When you are irritated, you diminish your force of attraction towards the good. You also decrease it when you feel depressed, dependent, nervous, or confused. Then, the force acts in the opposite direction, toward the bad side. Coveting another's goods, for example, filling the brain with machinations about how to access an inheritance, nurturing worries, or even envy and hatred towards those who might be in a better position for an inheritance, looking greedily at any other's good, for example, flattering the rich in the hope of making a profit, all foster mental states, which prevent the creation of that great pulling force. They lead to the torrent of petty, villainous, and narrow thoughts. Another great loss is to allow oneself to be carried away by malicious prejudices against others, even if only by participating inwardly in the nonsense of the majority. When you engage in conversations with people below your own level, you lose power, even if your supremacy achieves some small victories. You also lose power when you destroy the character or problems of others, no matter how witty and joking you are. Because you generate and emit mental forces, which prevent you from taking a much stronger stance towards humanity, and thus achieving an emancipation that comes out of yourself, and which allows you direct access to the best of others, in direct contact, from core to core, leaving everything else below and behind you. Ignore, as much as possible, the thoughts of humanity, talk as little as possible about it and with it. Keep it at bay with a shield of goodwill, and fight against every shadow of hatred, indignation, and contempt, which to present humanity could serve as a dark intermediary. As a messenger of all that envy, of that fanatical and concentrated malice against the finer man, whose mere presence you already perceive from afar. If this finer man launches a line of hatred, he is lost. Only an active wall of benevolence can sufficiently protect his soul. If in spite of this the encounter is inevitable, be positive from the beginning, that is to say, launch currents instead of absorbing them, deny him inwardly the access to all that comes from this environment. If you make his foolish preoccupations yours, your traction force will be reversed, for you will absorb his defects, and you will mix your confidence with his skepticism, mutilating your firmness with his hesitations. The human being who still knows when he lies, remains relatively authentic and fresh. In him, the lie is encapsulated in knowledge like trichina in the flesh. But most people's organisms are so infected by lies that they can no longer make this distinction. The nature of the lie is not only the false word consciously uttered, but the deception, including self-deception. A lie, which in good faith we have integrated within ourselves, blocks, like any other lie, the constructive elements of the truth. Many lies, which barely manage to stand, can often be saved with the fresh blood of a truth, just as breeds of rabbits, which from so much incest would be doomed to disappear, are mixed with the pure breed, to prevent them from